Fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Today we're continuing, we're kind of talking with horror writers and scarier, dark features. I mean, it's fantasy and things like that. I mean, we're in October. So joining us is a returning guest, and she's got a book out called Reawakening. It's a collection of short stories in the Seer of York universe. So Alethea Lyons, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me back again.
Well, Alethea, what's been going on? So now you've got a collection of short stories. Now, are these all your stories?
Yes, they're all by me.
You know, it's interesting. Writing short stories is kind of, I think it's difficult, but maybe you don't. I don't know. How do you get it so that you can get your story and character and everything understood so well in a short story?
I agree, it's very different as a discipline to writing a whole novel. This collection is actually a little bit between doing a standalone short story and doing a novel because it's building on what's already been introduced in book one, The Hiding. I do write short stories as well, and it is definitely a different discipline to try and, as you say, get that characterization in quickly. I'm quite a visual writer and quite a sensory writer, so I like to try and ground someone in the character that way and what they're not just seeing, but what they're hearing, what they're tasting, and then obviously trying to get a complete story arc, again, very quickly.
Yeah, that would be a lot of work, I think. So the Reawakening, let's talk about the premise. So what are people going to get when they pick up this book?
One way you can read it as a standalone, or you can read it having read The Hiding. The only one of the stories that has spoilers for The Hiding, really, is the first one. So if you haven't read The Hiding, just skip the first one and come back to it later. But it's kind of a monster of the week sort of deal, essentially. And it is the Harper, the main character, and her group of friends dealing with a variety of supernatural situations that arise that are just quick one-off situations and sometimes fairly straight-up monster of the week, sometimes with a bit of a twist.
So Harper, who is Harper?
Harper is an arcane archivist at York Minster, at the cathedral in York, and she is also a witch, which is illegal. So she's kind of working for both sides in that she works for the church and the Council of Faiths, and they send her and her foster sister to investigate supernatural crimes. But because she's also a witch, she's using magic to solve them, which could get her killed or imprisoned. And she's also trying to connect with that supernatural community at the same time.
How do you get into the headset of that character, Harper? How do you express Harper?
Well, that's actually where these short stories started, because some of them I wrote before I wrote the novel as a bit of an exercise to get into her head and see what she would do if I put her in certain situations. So I'd read quite a few things that were in sort of similar world settings. I play role-playing games, so things like Dungeons and Dragons, World of Darkness, and so I sort of used her as a character in a role-playing game so that I could explore different scenarios with her and see kind of where her ethics lay, where her preference was, for example, between having a fight or trying to have a discussion, where she would go to if she was afraid, and things like that.
Wow, and so you've got, you're introducing Zero, the starlight cat. So how do you write for a cat?
Oh, I love Zero. He's my favourite, but, don't tell Harper.
Yeah.
I really love writing non-human point of view, which was very interesting to explore in the first book because the antagonist is not human and we see things from her point of view. And then in Reawakening and in book 2, we see things from Zero's standpoint. It's an interesting exercise to try and get your head into, if I was a cat, what would my priorities be? Because obviously they're different to a human's, but he is also a higher level of intelligence than an average house cat. So he does have that capacity for thinking beyond, what am I having for dinner tonight? Where can I go down and sleep? But at the same time, there is still that bit of animal instinct in there that pulls back. So it was very interesting to kind of get behind his eyes and I did a lot of character exercises with him with a group of friends, again in a very kind of not role-playing game, but a very co-writing loose structure, where we basically sent our characters into a tea shop and decided to see what would happen if they started talking.
Wow. So you actually kind of role-play out the character.
Exactly.
Well, that's interesting. How do you know where to go? Or it's just by feel, right? You just sort of kind of what you would do if you were a cat.
Absolutely, and obviously there's some research involved there in terms of what does a cat normally do, what are their likes and dislikes, what can you feed them, and what's going to make them sick, because he is biologically a cat and he still has those instincts, and he still has like the fact that he would really like to eat a lot of cheese, but he really shouldn't eat a lot of cheese because it's not really good for cats.
And so you've got a lot of supernatural elements in this. How do you use supernatural? Do you use kind of the standard supernatural that people see all the time in movies, or do you have your own sort of world going on?
A bit of both. So some of the creatures that Harper and her friends encounter are standard folkloric creatures. So, for example, one of them is a Pūca. If you've seen the movie Harvey with Jimmy Stewart, Harvey, the 6 foot, whatever my husband would know, the 6 foot tall rabbit is a Pūca, which is a creature from Irish and Welsh mythology. And there are other ones then, though, that I've completely made up. So I've made up Girins, which was a 3 a.m. I can't type the word grins. There must be some kind of creature in my computer mistyping everything for me. And so I've kind of made up something that goes in the modern era, but fits with how little fairy-type creatures act in folklore.
That's interesting. What was your favorite story to write? Was there one in particular that sticks out?
There's 2 that are my favourites. So one is called Whispers in the Dark, and I really like that one because it's very visual. So it's involving Harper sort of being haunted by the voices from a book, and they're coming from all around her. And the way that it's written and printed is in different places across the page. So it's using that sort of visual as well as the words themselves to bring across the atmosphere. So that was really fun to design. And then one of my favourites, just as a personal favourite, is one of Zero's stories, which is based on him and some of the other characters from that tea shop meeting, and what might have happened if he'd met them in his universe rather than in a neutral place.
Oh, so how dark do you get in this collection?
Pretty dark. It's not gory dark or bloody, but there's some parts that are more psychologically dark, or just creepy.
Is this kind of the point? Or is there some sort of subject matter, or is this kind of all about entertainment?
Mostly about entertainment. The overall series has themes that are sort of a deeper meaning to them around the idea of not judging things on the face value. So, for example, in a couple of the stories, they go in having basically been told there's this supernatural creature that's terrorising whatever place, go in and sort it. And actually, when they get there, something different is happening behind the scenes to that. It's not the face value of that thing is different from us, therefore it's bad. And that's a theme overall that I like to explore.
So it's quite a process. So did you know, like when you're doing these collections, like 1 and 2 here, do you know that where you're going ahead of time? Is there going to be another collection? Are you all organized like that?
I'm medium organised.
Yeah.
If we were on video, you'd be able to see there's the wall behind me is just covered in post-it notes and pieces of A3 paper with scribblings on for various books. So I know the overarching plot for the series. There are various things that I've dropped into the Hiding and Reawakening that lead directly into books 2 and 3 and into that longer plot. I don't know every single detail. I find that if I know too many details, that hinders my writing process, because as you've said, the character process for me is a bit more fluid and character-led. So if I try and get too fine a point on what's going to happen, they rebel and do something else.
Right.
But I know the main points that they need to hit, and so I'm able to drop some of that in as some clues for people as to what's coming.
That's interesting. So how many of these are you going to do? Like, do you know now about how many you're going to end up with, or?
I think overall there's going to be about 6 books in total. There may be some more short stories that go in between, depending on some of the timing between books. There's about a 3-month gap between the end of book 1 and the start of book 2, where in order for book 2 to make sense and not start really slowly, certain things needed to have happened. And rather than, do a couple of paragraphs of, well, while you've been gone, this is what happened for the reader, I ended up showing a few of those scenes instead. So that may happen later on as well.
I guess the fantasy, dark fantasy, paranormal, it's all doing really well in the writing community. What do you think the attraction is for people?
I think that we like to be scared to a certain extent in a way that's safe. So we like to be able to challenge things and to consider things that frighten us and maybe don't make us too comfortable. But we can do it in that safe place of our own homes or sitting on the bus in the daylight. And obviously some people just really like to be scared. I am not one of them. But I do like to consider what that darker edge is and the things that it can bring up of what if. And I think fantasy and sci-fi are a really good place to do that, because you can take something that's happening in society now and put it through this different lens and use magic in it, use non-humans in it, but you can show those darker aspects of our society and extrapolate what they could become in a way that hopefully will help us avoid it.
Well, hopefully, but I don't.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I don't know about this, but well, that's kind of cool. So, what do you think you take away from each time you write one of these collections? What does it do for you?
I mean, primarily, I just enjoy doing it. There is a story in my head. There are characters in my head. They are very noisy, and so it's fun. And it's kind of my calm place to go to. So if I'm feeling stressed or anxious about something, I can be out of my own head for a while, and in theirs, that's a place where I can solve a problem. I can work out how they're going to defeat a bad guy. I can work out how their society can change for the better. And I have a degree of control over that. Whereas obviously in real life, sometimes there's absolutely nothing you can do.
Well, yeah, that's too bad, Get to work on the world, Well, so your characters are in your head all the time. Do you have any sort of control over that situation, or it just comes and goes and it's kind of out of your control?
It does come and go, and especially when I'm really deeply into writing something, when I'm drafting a new novel, then they do tend to be quite noisy, and I will be out and about and a situation will arise and my brain will go, okay, well, you as Thea would do this, but actually Harper would do it slightly differently. It's like there's always that little bit in the back of your head that keeps analysing things and going, how would my character respond in this? As part of sort of that getting to know them process. And a lot of those things won't end up in a book. You don't tend to send your characters grocery shopping too often, or out with a toddler. But it all helps build the depth of the character, and then when they're facing a weird situation that I would never face, I have a better idea of what they would think when that happens.
Do you have a particular character that you find most difficult to write and to work into the stories?
The one I find most difficult is Heresy, because he is the most different to me. He is a deception demon, or illusion spirit, depending on who you ask. And for the most part, he is basically there to have a good time and make fun of Harper when she accidentally does magic wrong and has bad consequences, because he thinks that's pretty funny. He will reluctantly help them with things if he doesn't think he has a choice. He's also quite witty and snarky, so I suddenly have to pretend that I'm witty and snarky as well. And I do have the problem that I keep writing characters who are smarter than I am, and then I have to suddenly go, okay, I need to go and research something.
Yeah. Well, where does someone like the Heresy come from? Do you think they're inspired by people you know or met somewhere along the way?
I think that a lot of my characters have characteristics of people that I know, not in terms of like a carbon copy of this is this fully formed person, but there is the inspiration of knowing someone who is really extroverted and is the life and soul of a party, or knowing someone who is really sarcastic. It does give you that little bit of a fallback of, well, what would they do in this situation? because that little bit of their character is in this. And what they would do might not be the same as the character because of all the other differences, but it can give you a starting point.
Right. Is there a lot of violence or action and scenery like that in this book, or is it kind of left to the imagination?
There's a little bit where it's shown where there are fights, but for the most part it's more about the human or human and non-human interactions. So even there's one short story that is about a fight with Harper and her foster sister Grace on one side facing a sort of cockatrice type made-up creature, and it does show the whole fight between them, and there is a little bit of blood in it. But the main focus of the story is on the interaction between Harper and Grace and how their different personalities cope with that situation and how they react together as sisters.
Oh, interesting. What happens to your characters when you're finished?
What's being finished?
Well, I mean, if someone dies, or a character that I guess they just stay with you even if you're done writing, like you don't get a break?
A bit. I mean, there's a lot of characters because I've got this series of books which is about a gang of characters, so there's quite a few of them. I have another science fantasy series that I'm writing, and they're very noisy characters as well. And then I've got a couple of other standalone novels that I've just sort of drafted, and we'll see what happens with them. And some of the characters don't get in your head in the same way. I think the main characters do more because obviously they're the ones whose view you have to put across the most. But even in a couple of cases where I've killed characters that I was close to, there's a little bit of me that still holds on to them because I really wish I hadn't had to kill them. Like there's one who, for plot reasons, legitimately absolutely had to go, and she's one of my favourite characters I've ever written. So I was really sad to have to stop thinking in her point of view, and because I'm never going to have to write her again.
Oh, you never know. She might return.
Oh, well, I've watched enough sci-fi series to see that you can't keep a good bad guy down. They always come back somehow.
They always come back. It was a dream. Well, that leads me to, what are your inspirations? Are there other sci-fi writers or fantasy writers or shows, or do you get it from somewhere else?
I think it's a mashup of everything, really. I mean, it sounds trite to say about inspiration from everything you see, but it really does come into it a lot. And I mean, a lot of the feel of the Seer of York books comes from the TV I grew up on, things like Buffy and Charmed, and as I was saying, things like role-playing games like World of Darkness. Those kind of worlds and relationships are all influence on what's ended up in these books. But there are a lot of writers as well, some unpublished that I do critique work with back and forth, some that are ones I've just bought in a bookstore and read, and I think little bits of lots of things come in. Like, I love the way Gormenghast has the place as a person and how gothic and eerie it is. So there's a little bit of that about the cathedral. I love The Library and the Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman, and I always wanted to write something with a really big secret library, so you get that in the cathedral archives. So there's lots of little bits that come from lots of places.
And how do you know when it's ready? Like when your book is done, how do you know, or story within the book, like when you're writing, is there a certain point where you stop rewriting, or you just know it's done?
When your publisher takes it away from you.
Yeah, when they stop bugging you, is that it?
Yeah, when you get to that deadline, I mean, there's a certain extent to which, yes, I know it's done. I could probably tweak it forever, and if I actually sat down and read it, I would be thinking in my head, I could change that sentence, or I could make that little bit stronger. And there comes a point where you just have to let it go and say, I've had an editor read this, I've had beta readers look at this and give me critique on it. They all said it's good. It's not mine anymore. There comes a point where it's not my book, it's the reader's book now.
Right, so it's a point to let go and that. And I mean, I guess you could always go back and look at stuff you've written, and you'll probably, at the point you are now, would want to change certain things, right? Because you become a better writer, or more experienced writer, I guess.
Absolutely. If you look at the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett, there's a huge difference in how he writes in The Colour of Magic to how he's writing by the time you reach the end of the series, however many hundreds of books later that is.
Yeah.
But you can see as you read through every few books, you can see there's been almost like a jump in his writing style and his knowledge of his craft. So because there's so many of them, it's actually a really interesting study in seeing someone grow like that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how it is, you know. Okay, well, let's talk about, do you do social media? Do you do a website? Do you like readers to come find you somewhere? Where is that they come get you?
Absolutely. I love people to come and chat and to look into things. So I do have a website and a newsletter. The next newsletter is going out this Sunday, and if you sign up for my newsletter, you also get a free short story. So that is available through my link tree, which also has all my social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, all the usual places.
Great. What's the website address?
The one-stop shop is a link tree address, so that's linktr.ee/Alethea R. Lyons.
Okay. Well, we'll put that up for people to get so they can find it easily, you know. So what's next? What's coming up next? Are you working on another project?
So I am working on book 3. I've started plotting that one and doing the research for it. I've got a few edits left to go on book 2, and I'm just sending that back to my publisher at the moment. So they will hopefully sign off that one's done, and that will be the point where I don't touch it anymore and can really get stuck into book 3.
Yeah, I mean, get it going, you know. Well, anyway, we appreciate you being here. The book, Reawakening, it's a collection of short stories in the Seer of York universe, and with us has been the author, Alethea Lyons. Thank you for being here.
It's been great chatting to you again.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.